5 years. 5 long years. That's how long it took us. At first it was going well. Then setback after setback. Loss after loss. Made what was going to be a quick and decisive win into 5 years of hell. But now it's ours again.
Okay, that may be a bit of an over-exaggeration, but still, Young Justice Outsiders has now finished airing, so I can finally give my thoughts on this long-awaited third installment. Young Justice was the subject of my first video when I created this channel, so I have quite a bit to say about it. Some good, others bad. And thankfully, the next season has already been announced, and I plan on doing a predictions video for that. So make sure to subscribe, and I'll be getting to that eventually! But as far as Outsiders goes, I'm going to be giving my overall thoughts of this season. Not an episode by episode breakdown, because if I did that, then we would be here all day. Although I will be talking about some episodes more than others, specifically the ones that really left an impression. And so with the intro out of the way, let's go ahead and start feeling the Aster. Outsiders started not with a bang, but with blood and guts to demonstrate fully that this show isn't on Cartoon Network, and it's definitely not aimed at children anymore. In fact, they can't seem to just stop killing them off. So me watching, as an adult, enjoyed the more mature take. However, it does feel a bit out of place at first. I kept thinking it was being more like those straight-to-video movies about the Justice League and Teen Titans that DC has released these past few years. It definitely takes an adjustment period, but once you get said adjustment, it's right back into stories and characters we love. Well, sort of. But I'll talk about that a little later. But first, I can't talk about Outsiders without mentioning the weirdly drawn elephant in the room. Yes, of course, I'm mentioning the animation. It isn't always the best. Characters staying posed while moving, the weird fascination with slideshows. Trust me, I'll be getting back to that one. And of course, the dreaded wandering eye.
Oh, jeez, did somebody open the Ark of the Covenant?
However, when it wants to look good, it certainly succeeds. Cyborg's transformation, as an example, being well animated and incredibly memorable. But after comparing this season to the previous ones, I can't help but feel that the budget was either cut, or if it just stayed the same and is simply being more stretched out due to having more episodes than season 2. I've seen arguments for both reasons, but as of writing, nothing concrete from the creators. However, if there is a budgetary issue, they were able to use it to their advantage in some situations. The most obvious is the new Darkwear attire that is used in earlier episodes, as it covered the bottom half of their faces, nullifying the need to animate the character's mouths. But a more artistic choice would be how they handled scenes taking place in space. As opposed to previous seasons, and most media interpretations of space in general, here the sound design is completely muted while in space. I first noticed it in episode 7, Evolution, which is one of those fantastic episodes I'll be talking about a little later. When the war world is engaging with an incoming enemy fleet, there are no sound effects to accompany the battle. At the beginning, I thought this was merely because of Cassandra's narration over the scene being more important than the action that was taking place. But this technique is further used throughout the season, which is greatly appreciated, as it helps make an animated show about superheroes feel more grounded when it gives itself these types of rules to adhere to. And whether this is the result of a lack of budget, or time to properly work on the sound design for these moments, or a new stylistic choice they just wanted to use from here on, the final product comes off as something to be admired. The same cannot be said about some of the voice work of the minor characters.
You got a baby in there. You got a baby in there.
What the hell is that? I know it's such a small thing to gripe about, but between the toddlers and the wannabe Velma, yeah, you.
Oh, my spectacles. Well, I'll be super amalgamated.
Could they have not just done a few more takes of that in order to not make it sound like nails on a chalkboard? Or did they really just want to do a Scooby-Doo parody? Again, it's a small thing, but it's very noticeable.
Indubitably.
Ugh, just shut the hell up, Velma. Okay, I've griped enough about these smaller issues. Now time to dive into the meat of the season. The main story is once again the light being up to no good, with Lex using his role as Secretary General of the UN in order to put more restrictions on the Justice League. With several members leaving the league to get around these restrictions, this results in the creation of Batman Inc., which we find out later is an anti-light solution in order to beat them at their own game. Problem is, those involved with the group aren't that forthcoming with the fact that they are secretly working together, keeping it a secret from the other heroes in order to protect them. as every hero's team is trying to prevent and rescue kidnapped teams being turned meta against their will, while new heroes rise and fall as they try and adapt to this ever-changing super world, all while the threat of Darkseid and the might of Apocalypse looms. This season's main plotline is a bit jumbled at times, especially when comparing parts 1 and 2, which makes it feel more like a completely different season instead of a continuation. As the first part focused more on the new heroes being made and their mission to find Tara, the second part shifts more prominently to Beast Boy's story against Granny and forming the Outsiders, with a few of the characters that were more established being left behind to focus on the new plotline, which, admittedly, is par for the course with Young Justice, as it's always switched its focus of characters between seasons, which is kind of a shame, as the more character-driven episodes were some of the best, not only of the new season, but of the entire series. The ones centered around Vandal, Beast Boy, and to a lesser extent, Nightwing and Artemis were huge standouts. Vandal's episode especially, as for all intents and purposes, he's been the main antagonist of the series, and we never really knew that much about him, other than that he was seemingly the leader of the Light and had a big plan for Earth. So getting his backstory was welcoming, and how they did it was very well done, using Cassandra's reading about his past and juxtaposing it with current events. By the end, this didn't even feel like an episode of television, but more like a feature-length movie. Villains are always more engaging when you can understand and empathize with them. Learning Vandal's history and what his true plan is definitely accomplished that, making him my favorite villain of the series. I even struggle with classifying him as a villain now, because in the past his plan was summarized by Aqualad as a survival of the fittest scheme, but in actuality he's just letting the ends justify the means, because he knows what the Earth will have to face one day. And forcibly transforming the next generation into powerful metahumans is strengthening the planet for this inevitable battle. He's trying to defend his home. Morality be damned. And sure, once Darkseid and Apocalypse are defeated, he will most likely want to rule the galaxy. But for now, it's all about doing whatever it takes to ensure the survival of Earth. And that's a motive that I can understand and get behind. And since we know so much more about Vandal's character now, little moments like this have become some of my favorite.
Complete once Granny hands over this living key to the anti-life equation.
Damn. I know it doesn't affect the season overall, but I just love those types of scenes. We've never seen him react like this before. He's been irritated, sure, but this is something else. He knows Darkseid has the end zone in his sights, and if Vandal makes a wrong move, it's game over. Going forward, I cannot wait to see more of Vandal's character and his plans. The same could be said after watching Beast Boy's episode. He was one of the supporting characters who has changed a lot over the seasons, and he needed some character development to go with it. After all, he went from this, to this, to this. And Nightmare Monkeys accomplished that by going through his whole history, all the tragedy and death he's been through. And it being presented in this childlike format in order for his mind to cope with it was just brilliant writing. And of course, I got a good chuckle out of that whole Doom Patrol Go bit. Even if I didn't like most of the Outsiders storyline, with it having a large focus on a social media presence and parts of the whole "we are all outsiders" movement just being kind of cringe. I mean, you will never be able to convince me to care about what's trending more on social media, but I suppose it's relevant to the times we live in, which in and of itself is kind of just sad. And speaking of sad, Nightwing and Artemis. They got their moments to shine in their smaller stories, as they both cope and seek closure over the loss of Wally. As these two were the closest to him, it was nice to see how they would handle the death of someone so dear to them. It really helps to show just how different these young adults are compared to when they were kids. Also, the callback to the first season's style was a very nice touch, and unpopular opinion, but I'm glad they didn't bring back Wally. I want death and consequences to mean something in this show, so they can have a real impact, and that threat was very apparent through Outsiders. Well, it was, except for one new addition to the team. Seriously, I'm surprised they didn't just put her in an orange hoodie at some point.
Oh my goodness, you killed Kenny. Bastard.
Yeah, it definitely became more of a running gag than a serious situation. If you watched my first Young Justice video, then you should know that I referred to Halo as Best Girl. But now she's more OP Girl. And unfortunately, the checkbox hero. That doesn't mean I ended up hating or even disliking her character. Just that it seems like the writers just threw everything onto her character for representation purposes. Ethnic hero? Check. Bisexual? Check. Gender fluid? Check. Huh. I don't have a problem with any of this being represented. We live in a more understanding time, and these issues definitely wouldn't have been brought up in television 10 years ago. Just how it was implemented was my main issue. She just blurts it out simply because somebody mentioned boys and girls. Nobody really reacts to it, and it's never developed any further than that 30-second moment. I guess I prefer it if it was more developed into her character than this, so that way it would feel more natural. But instead it comes off like how BioWare handled a similar situation in Mass Effect Andromeda. And trust me, you don't want to take any cues from Mass Effect Andromeda's writing. But at least it wasn't revealed during a damn slideshow. Looking at you, Calder. Revealing one of the original team members is in a homosexual relationship in the end of episode clip show is not the way to do it. I would have liked to have seen this relationship slowly grow over the course of the season until they develop feelings for each other. But again, having big character moments take place in time skips off screen is basically how Young Justice handles these things, which is kind of a downer if you really love these characters. I would have liked to have seen Calder and Wynn's relationship blossom into something that maybe neither of them expected. I felt that that could have been an interesting story arc for Calderon to go on.
I will never get used to sucking and blowing like this.
Well, I guess we know which one of them is the pitcher. Ha 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 ha! Ha! Sex. But my biggest gripe would have to be with those damn slideshows. They are just littered throughout the back half of this season. It might have been another time or budget issue, but they're shit, guys. They're terrible. The color palette looks different, characters aren't as detailed, they're weirdly off model at times, and, well... But the massive problem with them is they just scream of trying to do too much at once. It reminded me of Batman v Superman, not a compliment, and how that movie would just cram everything into a smaller amount of time, just for the purposes of setting something up in the future. The Rocket Brigade, or whatever the hell their name was, Karen's Child, and the rest of the Super Babies, Suicide Squad, it felt like they were just added to simply say, hey, these things exist, be excited. It was all set up for a payoff we won't get to see until next season, if not longer. And I'm sure when the payoff comes, I'll probably love it. But as of now, it's just taking away focus from what I would really have liked to see more of this season, such as spending more time on these plot points that were massive when they happened. The biggest example being Granny's use of the anti-life equation. That was an oh shit, how are they gonna deal with this moment? Only for it to be reversed just as quickly with no real repercussions. It really could have used just a few more episodes, instead of all the setup episodes for the future. And while we're on that subject, can we also get away from the whole, let's mind control the Justice League plot elements, please? I know it's kind of Darkseid's whole thing, but until he gets here, can we lay off it a bit, guys? Thanks. That's not to say having the setup and payoffs in that way is bad, as Outsiders had several from the past seasons, which were great. Learning more about Zatanna's deal with Dr. Fate, Red Hood's appearance, Xenomorph City, all of them being built up from the previous seasons. However, most of those instances had tie-ins to the story with the impact of the characters being the focus. The best example would be how the Helmet of Fate is used throughout the first season, alluding to Dr. Fate taking a body for his own use. Then we get the payoff when he does take over Zatara's body and comes back, which in turn gives Zatanna's character a new arc to follow, which is followed up in Outsiders. Sure, it was 2 seasons later, but it was followed up. The characters and how these moments affects them is the focus, while in Outsiders these setups are the focus, not their impact on the characters, which is frustrating as you're building moments instead of a story. They even bring back Ocean Master for the Super Babies plot, only to kill him off once they'd all been established, checking off 2 plot points with that one B story. Or how the Suicide Squad show up, get established, defeated, and it's never an issue or even brought up again, outside of one throwaway line during the finale. And speaking of the finale, man, I am just nailing these segues today. So as I said in my first video, they were going to subvert our expectations with the Judas Contract storyline, but in a good way. And then I took a shot at The Last Jedi, because let's face it, I'll take any chance I can get to crap on that film.
Batman had surveillance on Slade, and could tell from his micro-expressions that he was lying when he said you'd washed out of the League of Shadows.
Wow, Batman was able to read Deathstroke's micro-expressions, and from that he was able to determine that Slade was lying about Tara, thus meaning she was a mole? That's so cool! I hate it. I mean, I had kinda hoped they wouldn't find out about Tara until it was too late, as it would have hit the heroes much harder than Brionne's heel turn, as brutal as that scene was though. This just comes off as a bit of a, wait, really? Type of moment. And the explanation given that Batman can do this is...
because Batman is Batman.
I would have preferred that if she was discovered, it would have been something like Batman had bugged the Outsider's apartment. Maybe he could have done it when he was there on the balcony with Barbara. He would hear one of her calls with Deathstroke and piece it together from there. I don't know. In any case, she's found out before any real damage could be done to the heroes, and they're triumphant, in a sense. They do lose Geoforce to his own desire for power, albeit influenced by another meta, and Lex is removed from his position of power. And so the heroes celebrate their victory with a lingering shot of a ring to close out the season. I gotta be honest here, I had no idea what this was a reference to when I saw it, but it's apparently some sort of hero society in the future, I guess? So probably some time travel shenanigans are in order for Season 4. And let me just say that we thankfully at least have confirmation now of a Season 4. And considering how well Young Justice did on DC's streaming service, I'm hopeful that it will get more time and attention going forward. As far as this season goes, even with all the issues that it has, it kept me engaged enough in the story and characters that it made me want to keep coming back for more each week. And despite the flaws that I have with it, I can acknowledge that the creators do at least have a plan going forward. So I can sort of look past these setup issues I had, knowing there is at least a method to their madness. Unlike Disney Star Wars. Told you I'd take any shot I could get. But now, time to answer the question, was Outsiders worth the wait? Yeah, it was alright.